The next interview is with another extremely talented animator named Jared Beckstrand. I first got to know Jared when he came here to work for us at Golden Street Animation in 2009. During that time, we were working on a feature film project that required us to go to Mexico for a couple of months, and he was more than willing to take on that challenge. He was also a very big help in giving trainings to the other artists while there. It wasn't long before I gained a great deal of respect for Jared and his work. He truly is one of the best animators that I know, and has contributed a great deal to many of our projects. Not only is his acting and technical expertise superb, but he is extremely dependable and has a very measured and consistent work ethic, which we can all learn from. So without any further ado, enjoy this interview with the amazingly talented Jared Beckstrand.
I grew up in Long Beach, California. That's where I was born and raised until I was about 14 years old. So I grew up not far from Disneyland at all. My grandparents would take me there. My cousins would go along. My parents would take me. And so I grew up enjoying Disneyland and Disney movies very much. I enjoyed doing sports, going to the beach, having fun with the family. Currently, I'm married with 4 children. My oldest is 19 years old, and my youngest is 5. And they're a lot of fun. They are my reason for being here. One of the great things about working at Disney once I got there was being able to, well, first of all, I had a free pass to Disneyland and had young children, and we were able to go to Disneyland often and enjoy the park. I think the first year I went there 7 times and I got a little burned out. I think the next year we only went back twice. I started working for Don Bluth. Was the first animation job I got. I was freelancing from St. George, Utah, where I currently live now. I've since returned back home. I was doing cleanup animation on A Troll in Central Park was the very first film I worked on, and then Thumbelina. I moved down to Burbank for a little while and worked on Pebble and the Penguin and Thumbelina as well. And then I did a little bit of work on Swan Princess for Rich Animation. And then an opportunity came up to apply at Disney. They were enjoying a lot of success with Lion King in the theaters. And so they were looking to hire 15 assistant animators or in-betweeners. And I heard about it while working on Swan Princess. So I applied and I got a position as a cleanup artist on Pocahontas. And I started out working on John Smith, did a little bit of Pocahontas, and then while there I was doing animation tests, trying to get promoted on the next show to become a full-fledged animator. John Pomeroy was really fast with his animation and a great artist, easy to follow. And I kind of developed a little bit of a style, I think, from following up his stuff. I learned, you know, how rough he animated, and it helped me to see that he really wasn't too fussy about things. I think he really thought about stuff before he put it down on paper, and it helped to teach me you need to think about things before you just jump right into it. I think there's different philosophies about that, but I thought that it would help me to think about things before getting too far into it. After working with John Pomeroy, I was promoted to animation trainee on Hunchback of Notre Dame. My first animator, I guess, mentor, he was my mentor, was Tony Fucilli. And he was animating Esmeralda. And so I got to be a part of that crew of animators. And he gave me some nice stuff and was great to work with, very patient and kind, and helped me in lots of ways. So that got my feet wet with animating my first scenes on a production. And then after that, I would say Ken Duncan was a huge influence, because after working on Esmeralda with Tony, I worked on Hercules, and I was working with Ken on Meg. And then I worked with him on Tarzan, and he was doing the character Jane. So I worked with him on back-to-back shows, and we got to develop I think, a fairly good working relationship, and I learned a lot from him. Once again, he was very patient and kind and taught me a lot of good stuff. Animation seemed to be a natural fit for me because when I was young, growing up, I enjoyed drawing sports, images from the newspaper or Sports Illustrated or wherever I could find sports. And part of it was the fact that I really enjoyed sports myself. And so somebody early on suggested to my parents that I not really take formal art lessons at too young of an age. He said, you really need to just let him draw what he enjoys drawing. And so that's what I did. I loved to draw football players and basketball players and trucks and airplanes and things like that. But sports and drawing combined was a perfect mentoring ground for animation, because I learned how to draw a foot from the bottom, you know, or any kind of angle you could think of, depended on the photograph, and so I learned how to draw those things in motion, and so animation was a perfect fit. Loved Milt Kahl, and his influence, probably more than anybody else, rubbed off on me because his animation is so lively, and being able to look through the originals was just great. The opportunity to supervise on Treasure Planet, Ron Clements and John Musker were directing, and they allowed me to animate Sarah Hawkins. And so I was able to go to a few recording sessions. Laurie Metcalf did the voice, and that was great to be able to be a part of that and to see how that all worked. I didn't have the pressure of having to go and match another animator's style because I was in charge of that character. So working directly with the animators was really neat, and I think I got to look into their world maybe a little bit more. So that was cool. As far as working with other people and helping them develop as artists, I try to always be positive and to give praise and encouragement where there is any, even if it's just a little bit, you know. Try to find something that they can feel good about themselves so that they'll want to continue to progress and to try to continue to please you even more. I found that was helpful to me, and so I think that's most effective in dealing with other people, is that they feel like they're actually progressing and doing something of value, and not to be too critical, while at the same time there has to be the ability to point out where they need to improve, but do it in a way they feel like they can accomplish what you're trying to get them to do. My approach to my work, I think, comes with the fact that my work is my work, and it's part of my life, but it's not the only part of my life. It's a very important part, but I think if we have a life outside of our work, we can bring that into our work, and it becomes a great part of my life. And so I try to keep things kind of in perspective. You know, I think sometimes work can be so demanding that it can almost crush us. So each day I try to approach it like one day at a time. You know, I have a certain amount of work to do. I try to set goals. There's a certain amount of footage that I want to do during a day or a week. And I try to think ahead as much as possible, you know, do thumbnails, think about different ways to approach it, and realize that it might not be the exact thing that I want at the very beginning, but through reviewing it with pencil tests and things like that, I have confidence that I'll be able to get what I really want. And then even showing it to other supervisors, they'll give me feedback, and I understand that there's going to be places that they see something that needs to be different. And so I try to realize that, look, everybody's got their own view of what needs to happen. And as an animator, I'm working for somebody else, unless I have my own project, which isn't ever the case, really. And so I try to accomplish what they want, but give my own input so it's fresh too, and it's something that maybe they didn't think of. But my approach to work is the fact that, you know, it's a blessing to be able to create and do art at all. And so I look at it as a blessing every day to be able to do this. And if I'm getting paid for it, how much better can life really be? And so it helps in dealing with things that aren't as pleasing, because in reality, in the end, I'm doing something that I love more than anything else, probably, as far as work is concerned. My motivation as an animator comes from being able to see my work play back to me in real time. I really enjoy seeing the character doing what I hoped that it would be doing when I started drawing on that first sheet of paper. What attracted me to animation in the first place, it's kind of an interesting story, and I've never forgot it. There was a time when I was doing freelance for Don Bluth, the very first person I started getting work from, and instead of just FedExing the scene back, I decided to go down and take a tour of the studio and take my scene with me that I had just worked for 2 weeks on. And it was a scene that was animated by the great Bill Waldman. He was animating some dancing flowers, and I watched the guy shoot them one at a time. You know, it took 15 minutes or so, and he played it back. And I looked at it, and I couldn't believe it, because all these little individual flower drawings dancing around all of a sudden seemed like they were alive and had breath or something. It was just magical. And from that moment on, I said, you know, I don't want to just be doing cleanup animation. I want to be able to create this stuff and have my own interpretation on how things act and move and entertain. I thought, drawing is great, but this takes it to a whole nother level. I would have to say probably Jane on Tarzan was my favorite project to work on, because I had felt like I was starting to get my feet underneath me as an animator. I had worked on a couple of films up to that point, and I was working with Ken Duncan again, having come off of Hercules, and I felt a little more confident, and he started giving me some really good acting scenes, and I felt like they were working. And that was very gratifying to me, and it kind of spurred me on. And as that film went on, I got even better scenes, and it was just great. And Minnie Driver did the voice, and she was fantastic, great material to work with. I got to work on a section of the film where Tarzan and Jane are trying to communicate for the very first time, and Glenn Keane had boarded that section. It was so easy to see what he was really going after, and so putting that all together was very satisfying too, to see that in the end, how it came. And that's one of my favorite parts, to show my kids or any of the family members, this is the section that I got to work on. I think what I like most about being in the animation business is just the fact that you're creating characters that live somewhere in our imagination, but we get to see them brought to life. And there's nothing really like it, whether it's computer animation or claymation or hand-drawn animation. That is a truly unique thing. And when Frank Thomas and Ollie created that book, The Illusion of Life, they weren't joking, it's true. And as a kid, when I grew up, I thought those cartoon characters were real. It wasn't until later on that I realized, you know, someone had to create them. And that says a lot about those animators that create that. I probably like least about the business is trying to go find work. When you're done with a project, you got to find something else to do. Where am I going to get the money to pay for what I need to survive? And I would say deadlines too. Sometimes those can be crazy. Sometimes I don't like making changes to my animation. But those are some of the realities of the business that you have to deal with if you want to stick with it. To be successful in animation, I think, takes a lot of dedication. You have to be serious about it and be patient with yourself and with the time frame of things. Sometimes things don't happen as quickly as you want them to, but you have to put in your dues. And you also have to have a real strong motivation to create and to entertain. I think if you're doing it just because of a job, that'll show through really quick and you won't last. You really have to love what you're doing and have something inside of you that wants to say something. For aspiring animators, I would say learn the basics of drawing first, and then learn 3D animation, learn 2D animation, learn whatever it is that you're most interested in doing. I think there's value in having a well-rounded education of animation, but most of the people specialize in something. Not all, but I'm guessing probably most. And that's because they usually like one thing over another. I particularly enjoy animating. I've never had a desire to do anything different in animation because it's so rewarding to me. And so find what it is that you love most and stick with it until you get it. I think animation is still evolving as far as where it's going to be in the future. I think a lot of people talk about where it's going. Obviously we know where it's been, we know what's going on right now. I think 3D will always be around, 2D will always be around. Those are art forms that have been created and then have proven to have value to people. The greatest value in any form of animation is, does it say something to me? Am I entertained? Is there a message that I'm getting? Am I laughing? Am I crying? And whether it's holding up little hand puppets or creating drawings on a paper, there's complete magic, and it doesn't really matter how you do something. Are you saying something, and do you make somebody feel something when it's being done? There's other art that I do as well on the side. I do a fair amount of illustration. I've done a fair amount of children's books, picture books, and I also illustrate for children's magazines. I do some editorial cartoons. I've made some prints that I've sold to people. And I draw on paper with a pencil, and then I scan in my drawings into a computer, and I use Photoshop on a Cintiq tablet to do all the coloring and shading. And I didn't get into that until 6 years ago or so. But that's really enjoyable to me as well, is to be able to create animation, but also to venture into the world of color. And the Cintiq tablet in Photoshop is wonderful, because when I was young, I enjoyed doing pencil work, and if I did color, I would kind of shy away from paints because they were messy, or maybe because they were more expensive and my mom didn't want to buy them, but I enjoyed doing the color work with colored pencil. Currently I'm doing some freelance animation for a group out of Southern California. There's some religious cartoons that they're using with mice and dogs and birds, telling Christian principles through cartoons and in an entertaining way. And so that's a lot of fun. That's 2D animation. And I do, like I mentioned before, side illustration work. But I think it's important to maintain friendships, contacts over time in animation, because you never know where your next opportunity is going to come. And to make friends with people and not burn bridges, be kind and enjoy your work. And I think that has a tendency to stick with people, and your relationships can lead to work opportunities.